Retro Hangover is made possible thanks to donations made by Patreon by listeners like you. We would especially like to thank our 16-bit tier subscribers, Lyle McCarnes and Ashton Ruby. Thank you for your continued support.
Open your ears and crack some beers. You are listening to episode 52 of Retro Hangover.
And hello, Internet. Welcome back to the favorite podcast you are listening to at this moment, and without any other podcasts in your mind for consideration, where we are marvelously managing misfortunes, merrily misaligning malcontents for this episode, number 52 of Retro Hangover. I am your co-host, Chris Copleen, and, as always, here is your host, Shane King Dick Bob Dragon Koski.
Let's go!
Wow, that was pretty out of control. You got to calm yourself down just a little bit.
Here we go!
This is not going to get old.
No, not at all. I can't imagine what we're talking about today.
Yeah, that sound is the sound of dozens of listeners instantly turning off their podcasts. But thank you all that have joined us and are still with us currently. So I hope everyone had a great Turkey Day. I think our last episode came out after Turkey Day, but this is being recorded after Turkey Day. So I just want to say Happy Turkey Day and upcoming Christmas holiday, because this will be our last episode before Christmas this year, I do believe.
I think so. I think you're right. Technically, yes. Actually, our second episode in December will be out the 29th, so that is true.
And today is the day where we remember the great bombing of Hawaii of video games from Japan, where they just dropped a bunch of software off and made everybody happy.
Oh, I was like, where are you going with this?
Yes. That's what happened.
Okay,
that's what happened, right?
Yeah, no, that seems accurate.
And then Josh Hartnett.
I think I remember learning that.
Josh Hartnett and Ben Affleck played Nintendo 64 Mario Party with that one girl.
Yep.
Yes. Why can't I remember her name? Liv Tyler. They were playing
there you go.
Liv Tyler.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it was Mario Party.
Peach. Yes, in the famous film Peach Harbor.
Oh, that is terrible. Okay, now that's the sound of even more subscribers just saying, fuck, what the fuck?
Man, see, we peaked at that episode 50, and now it's all just downhill from here.
Let's piss everybody off.
That's it. We're done. Shut it down.
Episode 53, The Politics of the United States.
Oh, God. And why Waluigi should be elected in 2020.
Why not? Let's just do it.
Why not, right? That reminds me, there was like some theory somebody had recently about how technically, because Waluigi can't exist without Luigi, Luigi by proxy is responsible for all of Waluigi's many sins.
But
think about that one.
No, I guess. I mean, what sins has Waluigi created? I mean,
oh, you know.
I guess they're so bad they can't be mentioned. That's why he's not allowed in Smash Brothers.
He is he who shall not be named.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. He's going to be he's going to be the final boss in the next Smash. He has to be.
I think at some point they should just have like a plot twist in the Mario universe where Luigi just gets so fed up with being second fiddle to his brother that he just teams up with Waluigi and they like go on a quest for Mushroom Kingdom domination. I feel like that would be cool.
I actually really, really like the idea of that game. I think that could work. You could make it like
I'd be down.
Mario and Luigi type RPG game. It'd be Luigi and Waluigi's Big Brother takeover or something like that. I think that would be a fantastic game. That would be so fun.
All right, there you go. You're welcome, Nintendo. Get on it.
Yeah, we want royalties, by the way. You know,
Yes, please.
This idea is officially published, so you can't say that.
Let's talk percentages.
Yes, we have to go there.
I want to get in on that. Yeah.
In any case, Shane, how have you been doing? And what have you been up to?
You know, the holidays, or the beginning of the holiday onslaught, I guess, which, for the record, I feel like I'm one of the people that needs to stand up and make sure that Thanksgiving continues to be recognized, because the rest of you just want to steamroll right over it as soon as Halloween's over and go directly to Christmas. And you're wrong. Turkey Day still has its place. Thank you very much.
It does.
So that's what I've been doing. I mean, to be fair, I'd also be all right with Halloween just extending, well, probably indefinitely, but I'll take extension into, territory closer to Christmas. I'd be all right with that.
I think
that would be that's the concession I'm going to make. Okay. Is that if you're not going to recognize Thanksgiving, then at least give Halloween an extra few weeks.
Halloween just needs to be it needs to be all of November. Like at the turkey table, it's a skeleton of a turkey, because we're honoring our ancestors that have died. And then like the meat's already carved, but the skeleton's still on the table. And the plates are handed out with meat on it already.
Yeah, I'd be down with that.
I could go really more morbid with that, but I think I'll just leave it there.
And everybody's napkins are tiny, like little miniature pox blankets,
shaped like ghosts. You can make your candied yams with like ghost-shaped marshmallows.
Hell yeah! There you go. Go online and just buy one of those bags of just nothing but cereal marshmallows, but get the ones from like the.
Blueberry? Like Count Chocula?
Yeah, blueberry.
Yes.
Get those, and then make your yams with those. Now we're talking.
Yes. I think that would be disgusting, but we're onto something here. Just make a hollow giving.
We have so many good ideas in the first few minutes of this episode. I feel like we're redeeming ourselves. Yes. I'm okay with this.
Marketing.
This is fine.
We are the future of marketing departments, people. That's what you need to understand. This is the brainstorming think tank of the future.
The new holiday, give a ween. Giving ween. There you go.
Give a ween?
Give a ween. You asked me a question. I don't feel like I've answered it. All right. So what have I been up to?
This is a gaming podcast, by the way.
That's, as far as you know, I don't know.
Maybe
anything now.
We're getting there.
I don't know. Yeah. Listen, we talked about Waluigi. We've satisfied that requirement.
Yes.
But yeah, no, it's been good. Went to Savannah, Georgia for Thanksgiving. There's a lot of extended family up there, so that was cool. It's always nice to go up there. Plus, the weather's a little bit cooler because it's a bit further north than we are, so that's always a plus in my opinion.
Yes.
As far as like my gaming, that hasn't really changed since the last episode. I've just been still trying to wrap some things up. I am very close to 100%ing Kingdom Hearts 3 on my PS4.
Yay.
Which will actually be the first game I will have gotten a what do they even call them? Platinums? Is that what that is? Platinum trophy?
Yeah, platinum trophy.
Yeah, that'll be my first platinum trophy. So that's cool. Getting my money's worth out of that game. I think I just rolled over the 60-hour mark last night. So not too bad, all things considered. And still going on season 19 of Diablo 3 because, that's always kind of an ever-present thing. And then playing, within the last week or so, I fired up a certain game and have been playing that we may or may not be discussing today.
He's been playing Mario 64, everybody.
Fuck! Well, fine. Also, I was thinking about it. I don't even know why we bother to be all coy about what it is we're talking about because it's in the fucking episode title.
Yeah.
Anyway.
You were the one being coy.
Listen, we were both at fault for that on many occasions before.
Right.
I'm just saying that, we're getting out there and just saying it now. But yes, I fired up some Mario 64 again and started playing through that. And on replay now, I have some things I want to say about it, but we'll get to that after the brief history. But
yes.
What about you, Chris? What have you been up to?
Busy, I guess. I don't know. Mostly with college, trying to figure that out. Black Friday was okay. Hanging out with a lot of family, doing a lot of events just around because it is the holiday fire up. I beat Breath of Fire 3 finally. So that's
Yay.
done. I don't know if I said that last episode or not, but I have beat it. I either said I was going to beat it or I was about to beat it, but it has been done.
I think you said you were close.
Yes. Rapid Fire Review has been created for our 16-bit tier patrons, so they will be getting that at some point. Other than that, in terms of video games, I started playing The Last of Us. It's working a lot better on my PS4 than it did on my PS3. I've already made it a little bit further. But
I mean, further in that it didn't melt your console?
I mean, yes. It has not melted my console yet. I mean, to be fair, the other one is still not, it's living, so it didn't kill it completely. So there's that benefit. What I'm finding is a lot of people have said this is kind of like that end-all, be-all game. And what I found is if you think that, you probably like movies more than video games. But that's just my opinion.
Ah, yes, the Hideo Kojima problem.
But I don't know. There's some good gameplay things in there. I just don't see all the hype. But hey, that's on you. I have yet to play it. Maybe I'm missing something. I'll figure it out later.
Well, let me ask this.
Yeah.
Are you the type of person that, like, do you enjoy, like walking simulator type things, like What Remains of Edith Finch or like those kind of things?
I want to like them, but I don't.
But you don't.
I don't.
Okay. Well, to be fair, I also haven't gotten a chance to actually play Last of Us yet, so I'm kind of talking out of my ass here, but I feel like if the more like narrative driven, less gameplay sort of thing where you're just kind of controlling a movie almost, then if you're not into that, then I can see why you probably wouldn't see the hype. So I get it.
It's a little bit more involved than that, and there's some cool things, but it's really hard for me to describe. I'm going to try and get it done and do an RFR. I'll probably talk more about it on our next episode. Because I think I've kind of gone on a little bit too much about it here. And I do want to have a more fully formed opinion because like I said, I'm just about not quite halfway through the game. So there might be more stuff for me to do, but there are some serious problems I have with the game. But in other video game stuff, didn't really go out and get the big Black Friday shopping spree. I don't know about you.
I mean, you didn't want to go get in a fist fight with a single mom at Walmart?
No.
Okay.
Amazon had some good deals. I did get Nier Automata.
I mean, to be fair, I guess you could do that any day of the week if you wanted to.
Yeah, if I really wanted to, I could just go up and start beating up Walmart moms. That would be easy. I could do that without going to the store.
That yes?
I could just like run around my neighborhood and start getting into fights with random women and probably go to prison.
I was trying to figure out what you meant by that, but okay, yeah, no, go on.
It is more fun just doing it in the store, though, because there's more ways to cover and hide, and it could be more of a goose chase. I could enjoy that, and it'd be fun. But in any case...
That's true. Be a goose, do crime.
Yes.
So anyway, Nier.
I got Nier Automata, so that'll be... That'll probably stay wrapped up until I'm ready to play it 3 or 4 years from now. And...
Sounds right.
I got Ogre... I went to a local game store... And I got a couple games there. I ended up getting a Christmas present for one of my friends, but his fiance told me he already had it. So I had to trade it back in and ended up getting an Xbox with an HDMI out for it, which was bittersweet. But because, the Christmas present didn't work out. But at the same point, I got a new Xbox 360. So there is that. Cool. Then what else? Oh, yeah. Also, a PC Engine. Have you ever seen a PC Engine in real life? Because have you ever seen a TurboGrafx 16 in real life?
No to both.
Oh. Well, I just want to say the PC Engine is the most adorable, smallest video game console I've ever seen in my life. It is... I've always seen pictures, but until you see one in real life, it cannot be stated how small this thing is. It's about the same size as a Walkman. It's a 16-bit console. It's cute. And the games are cards. And it's amazing. But in any case, Shane.
Yeah. Yes.
We are going to be talking about a game that probably is near and dear to many of your nostalgic Christmas hearts. And that game is Mario 64. So, Shane, why don't you take it away and give us a brief history on Super Mario 64.
Dear Mario, please come to the castle. I have baked a cake for you. Yours truly, Princess Toadstool. Peach.
Who could have guessed that a simple invitation to share baked goods would turn into a world-hopping, portrait-jumping, star-collecting adventure of genre-defining proportions? The idea of a three-dimensional Mario title goes as far back as the development of Star Fox for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. It It was during this time that producer and director Shigeru Miyamoto considered the creation of an SNES game that would leverage the Super FX chip, tentatively dubbed Super Mario FX. Miyamoto's vision included gameplay based on an entire world in miniature, like miniature trains. As we all know now, Miyamoto would eventually repurpose this concept for the Nintendo 64. Not because of the new console's significantly greater horsepower, but because its controller supported additional button inputs, allowing for more complex gameplay and control. According to Jez San, founder of Argonaut Software, the studio that co-developed Star Fox, Super Mario 64 was influenced by a cancelled prototype game Argonaut had been working on starring Mario franchise character Yoshi, which later transformed into 1997's Croc, Legend of the Gobos. Development of Super Mario 64 spanned roughly 3 years, with 1 being spent on the conceptual design and the remaining 2 on actual development of the software. According to interviews with Miyamoto, there were almost always between 15 and 20 people working on the game at any given time. Given that 3D was a relatively new frontier for the team, a somewhat significant portion of the first year was spent painstakingly deliberating on how the camera should function. Initially, the game was planned to have fixed camera angles and paths, much like Super Mario RPG. Ultimately, the team settled on a free-roaming, three-dimensional design. Despite this, some remnants of the original fixed concept remain in the game, particularly in the player's encounters with Bowser. The 3D graphics for the game were created using the Nichimen N-World toolkit running on a Silicon Graphics workstation. Perhaps unsurprisingly, a high priority was placed on Mario's animation, with the team testing and refining his character model's movement and gameplay feel before tackling environment and level design. During this time, the developers attempted to implement a split-screen co-op mode with player 2 taking control of Luigi, but it was ultimately scrapped as they couldn't get it working satisfactorily. Miyamoto's guiding philosophy for Super Mario 64 was, put simply, more. He was determined to include more detail than any previous entry in the Mario franchise, including everything from enhanced character expression to more complex puzzle elements. In fact, since Super Mario 64 was developed in parallel with The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, some puzzle concepts originally intended for Link's 3D debut were snatched and placed in Mario's Path to Victory instead. Super Mario 64 was released to near universal acclaim, both critical and popular. During the first 3 months of 1997, it sold over 523,000 units in the US alone. At the 1999 Melia Festival in Cannes, the game took home a gold prize for achieving revenue surpassing €21 million in the European Union during the year prior. The game also garnered numerous industry awards, including several Game of the Year accolades from various media outlets, with reviewers praising its graphics, musical score, scope, and replayability. By May of 2003, Super Mario 64 had sold well over 11 million copies. The game would go on to be re-released on the Nintendo Wii Virtual Console, as well as receive a remaster for the Nintendo DS handheld system entitled Super Mario 64 DS. Super Mario 64's impact on the video game landscape cannot be understated. The title set a gold standard for all future 3D games that carries on even to this day. Dan Houser, co-founder of Rockstar Games, may have said it best when he quipped, "Anyone who makes 3D games who says they've not borrowed something from Mario or Zelda 64 is lying." And that is your brief history of Super Mario 64.
All right, thank you, Shane, very much for that brief history of Super Mario 64. One of the games that really did define 3D video games moving forward, and just in general, it really set the standard of what 3D video games were supposed to be, since it was such a relatively new thing there. I do find it interesting that it did start out as a concept with like mini Marios, which we maybe would see later with March of the Minis, which came out was that a DS game or an advanced game? But we would see something similar to that later. But many people might be wondering why this episode is coming out as a Christmas episode. So, Shane, why don't you give us your history, your personal history with this game, with Mario 64?
Sure. That's a good point. I guess we haven't explicitly said that yet, but For me, and I am going to go out on a limb and say I am probably not alone in this. Christmas or the Christmas season and Mario 64, and by extension, the Nintendo 64 in general, really are very closely related in my personal history. So I kind of have this association between the two, which is why we decided to do a Mario 64 episode now in December as opposed to any other time. So yeah, my experience with it to start with was basically just getting it as a gift for Christmas one year. And I don't think it was the year that the N64 came out, because if I remember correctly, I believe I got this as a pack-in version and it wasn't initially like that. Of course, that might just be my memory slowly failing me because I'm becoming an old man. That is 100% possible, but I'm pretty sure that was the case. But I have a lot of really fond memories, playing this game on late Christmas morning and probably into Christmas afternoon and evening, and then many, many days to follow that. But that's kind of my first experience with it. I don't want to be super hyperbolic about this, because I know that a lot of people just lavish praise on this game in particular, and a number of other titles from around this era. Not that it doesn't deserve it, but I don't want to go too bananas with that. But it definitely was a very eye-opening experience. There was something like strangely sort of magical about it in a way, because outside of some PC gaming, this was really the first 3D experience that I think I really had. And to see Mario in a 3D space like this and have the freedom to roam around and explore, the world was, it's hard to relate it now because that's a lot of old hat to most people, especially younger folks, growing up with games now, that it's really hard to express that accurately, but it was really a sort of revelation at the time.
Oh, absolutely. And you're not alone in this game really, resonating as a Christmas game, because that's when I got the game as well. It was for Christmas in 1996. It was the first year the N64 came out, because that was the hot new thing, and that's the system I obviously wanted, because for years, you had seen Killer Instinct. Killer Instinct was a big deal back then. I was very much into fighting games. Killer Instinct typed up for that, obviously. But big Super Nintendo fan. But you saw Mario 64. Mario 64 had been out for a little while already by Christmas time. So I think my friend across the street, he had gotten it already, and we had been playing a little bit of it. So to get my own copy of Mario 64 and just how it defines 3D games and how you could play video games in that space was revolutionary. You never had seen quite anything like that. But when I do think of Mario 64, I think of Christmas. I think of the artificial heat, and people living up in the north might know what I'm talking about. Maybe not. I might be ridiculous here, but like the artificial heat that your house's heater produces during the winter, and playing that game and talking to friends and how to discover secrets and rumors, and just playing with your family and handing off the controller. And that's what Mario 64 really reminds me of, that first year it came out. Interestingly, like I've said previously on the podcast, that same Christmas, my brother got a PlayStation, and one of the games he got was Bubsy 3D. So there was definitely a contrast between the two. And like when you could contrast it back in 1996, the difference then was still staggering. Like nowadays, yes, it's definitely staggering just because Bubsy 3D was a terrible game. But getting to see the difference between Mario 64 and Bubsy 3D when both were current and both were somewhat fresh, looking back at it now, it's somewhat of a really great comparison to have between the two systems and how revolutionary Mario 64 really was.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. And I like your description of it. That's actually pretty accurate. I mean, me being from the north, that actually tracks pretty closely with how I recall it. So it's nice. It's like warm memories. Although it is funny though, because you're talking about handing over the controller to like family members to give it a try. So you want to talk about how this was really the first foray for not only the console gaming industry, but just people in general into the three-dimensional gaming. I also remember having like my parents give this a try because they, for what it's worth, I love them. They put in the effort to try to play some video games that I was playing back in the day, and they could handle like Super Mario Brothers for the Nintendo, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's mostly pretty straightforward. It's 2D. You've got like two buttons. You run back and forth and you jump, and okay, great. They've got that. Mm-hmm. But handing them, first of all, this like abomination of a controller, or at least that's what it looked like to begin with, for the N64, handing that to my parents and being like, here, you use the stick, and also there's a trigger, kind of like a gun, I guess, and then there's these other buttons. Okay, have fun. And then that coupled with sort of wrapping your brain around navigating in a three-dimensional space for probably the first time, it was interesting. They were just like, yeah, cool. That looks really great. Here you go. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Merry Christmas. I'm gonna go make more adult cocoa now. Thank you.
Hopefully they weren't making it for you. Hopefully they were.
No. Unfortunately. Well, I say unfortunately. What was I, like fucking 12? I don't know. But anyway, yeah, something like that. But no, I mean, and so, okay, talking about the controller, I say that it's kind of an abomination. I personally, and I've said this before on the podcast also, by the way, that I didn't mind it that much. I still don't. I actually think, as weird as it was, the N64 controller actually did what it needed to do pretty admirably. And you could see that in Mario 64. Now, of course, this applies to pretty much any like first party game. Generally speaking, you're going to have much better like one-to-one with the hardware because it's what it was made for. And, the people that made the damn console are also working on this game. So it shouldn't be surprising that Mario 64, for the most part, and particularly at the time, controlled extremely well. That's actually one of the things that many of the reviewers at the time pointed out, was just how natural the movement felt. And there was actually one reviewer that even went so far as to say it was the first time that navigating in a three-dimensional space actually felt right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, because up to that point, right, there had always been controls that were very clunky. And it always just felt like there was this weird disconnect where that you are controlling a thing on the screen. Whereas Mario, so much time and effort was put into making sure that he felt and played right, as I had mentioned in the brief history, that really, it did pay off. Now granted, and we'll probably get into this a little bit later when I start being a little nitpicky, I personally still think there are some issues with how Mario controls in Mario 64, but by and large, it was a giant leap forward, and it was unprecedented. So again, at the time.
So I think that everything you said is 100% correct about how things had evolved. And I think if you go back and you look at what 3D games were like prior to Mario 64, they were very stiff, because people need to remember Mario 64 was far from the first 3D platformer. And if just for an example like that, go back to Jumping Flash on the PlayStation. That's a 3D platformer. That is also remembered fondly, but it's also from a first-person perspective. And that's a lot of what you'll see back in that era. If there is a game that was considered to be fun or enjoyable that still holds up somewhat over time, pre-Mario 64 in a 3D environment, it's because they were from a first-person perspective, more or less. I really can't think of many successful 3D platformers prior to Mario 64. And I really do think that one of the reasons for that is the analog controller. The analog controller, now, again, it's not the first analog controller, of course, because that was the Atari joystick. The Atari joystick's an analog controller.
Right.
Same with like the ColecoVision and a lot of other controllers in the arcades are analog controllers, right? But
Right.
for the longest time, a console, because like you said, 2D games, was associated with D-pads, which again, Nintendo bought into the foray. Now, to the controller itself, one of the criticisms that Nintendo had, probably up until the Wii, is that the controllers were designed around their marquee game that they were going to be releasing for the system. Now, for the Super Nintendo, that's not so much true, I don't think. But you really start to see that with the N64, because Super Mario 64 is completely catered to with the N64 controller, except for like a second analog stick, which I'm sure we're going to be talking about later, which could have made it a lot better. But the whole entire concept of bringing an analog stick into the 3D environment and using it to move around was an entirely new concept. Everything was just very much on, in terms of platforming, was still attached to the D-pad. They couldn't move away from the D-pad in the 3D environment, and many developers struggled with that fact. Even though analog options were available, for Sony, they had the analog flight stick, which did have analog controls. Not ideal for 3D platforming, of course. And the Sega was developing its own semi-analog controller. It's an analog controller. I just don't think it's very good for the Sega Saturn itself around the same time. So it's not like, developers were completely unaware that an analog controller worked better in 3D. However, the way that Nintendo implemented it and executed it was damn near flawless. And to pick Mario was probably the best method of doing it, because as you said, the 2D environment, very basic. You run left and right. So they're just transposing what Mario was doing in a 2D environment and bringing it to the 3D environment. So Mario doesn't really have to do much other than run and jump, but they did implement, of course, the punches, the kicks, and the crouching. But it's not overly complicated, especially for someone brand new to video games, which Nintendo has routinely championed as a method of them getting people into the Mario games and bringing them into their experience. I think that's what really sets Mario apart and makes Mario 64 such a special game.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And to your point about the controller, I think it's pretty evident, right? Like, even if you didn't know the backstory of the development of the console or anything, like the controls feel like they were built for that game, whereas most other N64 titles, even first party ones, following Mario 64, it actually felt more like the game needed to be created in a way so that it would work with the controller rather than like the other way around. It's almost as if they had to make some compromises or something, or they had to do something funky to get it to work well, just because of how, as you said, how catered that control layout was specifically for Mario 64. And so you're also talking about just 3D platformers in general. 3D platforming is hard. I'll just go ahead and put that out there right now. It's hard from a number of different angles. I mean, one, it's difficult just from a developer standpoint to get it right. And the definition of what right is for a 3D platformer can be somewhat nebulous. But for the most part, Mario 64, especially being one of, because it wasn't but one of the first, did extremely well at getting this right. Because to your earlier point where, a first-person perspective was used in a lot of cases, I don't know about anybody else, but first-person platforming, in my opinion, is awful.
It's not. It's an acquired taste.
Yeah, sure. Let's go with that. Yeah, it's like the black licorice of gaming. But like, I just okay. So the first thing that pops into my head, right, and this is something that we're also going to talk about on a future episode. Actually, possibly next March. So there you go. Little
teaser.
Little teaser preview of that. But Half-Life, the original Half-Life, right? That game is amazing. I'm just going to go ahead and say that it's probably one of my favorites as far as, history of gaming is concerned. But man, they tried to do some first-person platforming in that game, and as great as that game is and how revolutionary it was at the time, that part or those parts still kind of sucked. Like platforming in a first person perspective is just hard to do anyway. And in my opinion, it's not particularly fun. So then you go and move into the 3D space. And part of the reason that Mario 64 got this so right, which we haven't really touched on yet, is also actually the camera. It's these two things that are sort of working in tandem with each other. They've got the control scheme that ended up working really well. And obviously they spent a lot of time on getting that right. But the other part that they struggled with quite a bit was how in the hell to get this camera to work the way that they wanted it to. Because a lot of, third person games prior to this functioned more on fixed camera angles. Of course, like the first thing that comes to mind would be like, Resident Evil, right? And stylistically, that works really, really well for Resident Evil, which is a whole other discussion. But they decided they didn't want to do that with this because they wanted to really impress upon the player that this was a 3D space that you could just explore to your heart's content and you have ultimate freedom. And so having fixed camera angles was just not going to work for that. So they had to get this free floating camera that the player could control to work well. And that in itself is a huge feat. And even still, I have some gripes about how the camera works in this game,
right.
But I kind of have to give them a little bit of a pass just because they were one of the first to really get this mostly correct.
I give them all the pass. I give them a complete pass.
Yeah, but I mean, so it's those two things that kind of work in conjunction with one another to make this 3D platformer actually like work. Because like I said, it's a lot of it has to do with depth perception and things like that. It's really hard to judge in a 3D space when you're trying to do platforming. And if your controls and your camera control are not precise enough, then it becomes an exercise in frustration. And like one little tidbit about that, as far as the development of this game is concerned, they recognized how much of an issue that was. And if you notice when you play through Mario 64, a lot of the objects in the world have these shadows underneath them that realistically wouldn't make sense. Like the object wouldn't really be casting a shadow in that way if this were a quote end quote real world. But that was sort of a concession that they made specifically to help the player with their depth perception because they realized how much of a problem that is when trying to judge things like, spaces to jump over and things like that. So it's a really fine line that they needed to walk to get this to actually work as well as it does.
And that did it well, they did. But when it does come to 3D platformers, and you do talk about the camera, just to speak about how revolutionary the camera is, and if you want to put in perspective just how good the camera is, again, go back to Bubsy 3D and how that camera was managed. It's a horrendous game regardless. But
I was just going to subtitle this episode like Mario 64 shitting on Bubsy.
It didn't have to. Bubsy shat on itself. But
that's fair.
For a long time, people just couldn't figure out how to really do the camera correctly in an open space. So you have a lot of 3D games from that time, and I'm more referring to the PlayStation because that was the system that was focused on the 3D experience, right? That was the premier 3D video game system. Everything was mapped to the R and L buttons in terms of how you rotated your camera. And that's how it was for a lot of games for a very long time. And if you do want to look at a good 3D platformer that was made with the D-pad, just take a look at Crash Bandicoot. But if you go to Crash Bandicoot, you'll realize that camera's not an issue because, again, it has the fixed camera angle. You're not in an open space. The path you take is linear. Whereas Mario goes from having a linear path to, as you said, the key word is explore. The first world you go to, like King's Bob-omb's world, right?
Bob-omb Battlefield, yo.
Bob-omb Battlefield. The first world you go to it's expansive. You're not limited to anywhere you can go. The entire world place, like it has a limit. You can't just walk off, Bob-omb's Battlefield. You just can't walk off the level. But anywhere in the level is accessible to you at any point in time. That just wasn't something you really saw outside of like an action RPG or something like, The Legend of Zelda, a game like that. but it was confined to a platformer. And you just really didn't see that with the fluidity and execution that Mario 64 delivered, especially in a 3D space.
Okay, so speaking of three-dimensional games with this sort of like free-roaming kind of camera, you put something in our discussion notes for this episode that I want to touch on because I am curious as to what your opinion on this is. You note that this is in fact a better game than Ocarina of Time. I feel like that's going to offend some people. So why do you think that?
Well, first and foremost, I put that in there because I wanted to irritate you.
Yeah, so great. Congratulations. You've done it. So go on.
But second of all, like I'm genuinely honest. So one of the things I've been thinking about is how well this game has aged graphically. Because one of the key components, one of the key complaints and criticisms of the N64 is its muddied, nasty looking graphics. Right? And how a lot of games are dark and how a lot of games are muddy and just not just muddied as in the pixelation, but they're just mud and rock and.
Yeah, no, you get a lot of brown ass textures. That's like, I mean, as much as I love Gauntlet Legends, like if you go back and play that now, it looks like someone melted a chocolate bar and it looks terrible.
Yes. But if you look at Mario 64, it's bright. It's colorful. It doesn't really stress the system in terms of draw distance in any of its levels. It makes sure that the levels are contained. It feels wide open and very heavy focus on exploration while really containing the player at the same time to make sure that the graphical fidelity doesn't drop off. On top of that, it's a very simple game, but it takes a while to master. Like your skill will determine how far you go, and you can beat the game without having to go through all the levels. You don't have to go through every single stage. You don't have to get 120 stars. You can play it at your leisure. So it's more accessible. It can be as demanding as you really want it to be, and there's a consistent level of enjoyment throughout the game. It's just consistently more fun. It looks better. People are going to probably hate me for saying this. The soundtrack is better, and just the core mechanics in and of itself is better, and I don't have to worry about Z targeting. So there it is. I mean, it's a better game.
Am I in the minority in saying that I actually liked Z targeting? Is that
it was Z targeting? I'm not going to lie. Z targeting is essential for having to play the game, to play Zelda. Without Z targeting, that did revolutionize and forward that genre of gaming. However, it also slowed down the pace. It's not like a real duel. True. Whereas Mario 64, the kicks and punches kind of suck, right? Because it's really limited in space. But you're not doing it too much. That's not the focus of Mario 64. The focus isn't battling Goombas. The focus is platforming.
Well, that depends on which star you're trying to get, Chris. As a matter of fact,
not a lot of stars that do that though.
Yeah, but the ones that are super fucking irritating.
And even the Bowser battles, and I'm sure you're about to get to some of those. But even the Bowser battles themselves is more about how well you can navigate Mario around a space and taking advantage of an opportunity. I know Zelda has that too, but it's more free-flowing. I don't have to punch Bowser. I just to make sure Bowser gets into a position where I can grab Bowser by the tail and throw him and say, "So long, gay Bowser," and throw him into a bomb.
Okay. So yeah, I guess let's talk about that real quick. So you said in our notes that you didn't actually hear that when Mario says that either.
No.
So I was looking this up earlier, and apparently, and I don't know if this is accurate or not because it's the internet, but I guess you said that it was supposed to be "So long, King Bowser."
Yes.
I saw elsewhere that it was supposed to just be basically an affectation at the end of the word "long," so that so Martinet was basically just saying like "so long, like it's me," that kind of thing. So it's just like "so long, King Bowser," and the way he enunciated it. I mean, I'm gonna be honest. It sounded like "so long, gay Bowser" to me. And I know that wasn't it. I know that's not what he's saying.
I have no idea what he's saying. I always thought it was like some Polish thing. I didn't get it and why they were saying it. I thought it was like Trudowski Bowser. I'm like, what does that even mean? It's like
yes, yeah. Mario is suddenly Polish for no reason,
or Russian, or some Eastern European nation. I don't know. I thought he was Italian, and I was just, I didn't get it. But yeah, it's not so long gay Bowser, but you can keep thinking that, and if that makes you feel better.
It's hard to unhear that after you say it, but no, actually, I'm not really going to nitpick anything about the Bowser fights. Those kind of are what they are. Like it takes a little bit of practice to make sure you can chuck them into the bombs on the side correctly, but there's not really a lot to nitpick there, in my opinion. So, all right. We'll kind of Oreo sandwich this discussion in that, like, we've lavished a lot of praise on it. I've got some nitpicks I want to talk about, and then we can close it out with some cool, like, facts.
One more alibi about how Mario's better than Zelda.
Sure, yeah, no.
Its water levels are better.
I guess you're not wrong. I mean, water levels still just suck in general, but yeah, sure.
Way better.
It's no water temple, that's for sure.
Thankfully.
Yeah, so okay. So these are actually kind of fresh in my mind, having replayed about based on my star count, about a quarter of the game. I got about 35 stars this week while I was playing. So we've talked a lot about how the game, for its time, controlled extremely well, and how the camera was more or less revolutionary for the industry. And those are not inaccurate statements. However,
they were great for 1996.
Yes, they were amazing for 20 plus years ago. But going back to it now, there is definitely some stuff that kind of left to be desired there. There are many times playing through that game where you have to kind of fight with the camera to get the viewpoint that you want. And you will soon learn to hate that buzzing sound when you try to move the camera. And it's like, nah, you don't get to go that way. That's problematic. And then also, for as good as the control scheme is, and it is, there are still some minor things about it that actually really bother me, that that actually kind of make the game almost, in my opinion, artificially more difficult in some ways. Just some of the short animations that occur as you're moving Mario. Like, one really good example is wall kicking, right? So there's a technique in the game, and they explain it to you because you need to use it in order to get a couple of the stars in a couple levels, where you are supposed to jump towards a wall, and then when you hit that wall, you're supposed to press the jump button again, and Mario will wall kick off of it and jump in the opposite direction. That's not anything new for anybody who's played the newer 3D Marios, because that's just kind of a staple now.
It's like Mega Man.
Right. But here's the problem. They want you to do a wall kick, but they also decided to include a very explicit animation of, if you hit a wall, basically Mario is kind of hitting his head and he makes this sound and bounces off. Those two things do not go together. Like, if you're asking the player to purposefully jump into a wall so they can kick off, why in the hell would you also include the possibility of there being basically a bounce off animation where the character hits his head and then falls backwards? And during that whole animation, by the way, you have no control of the character. So it's like a 50-50 shot as to whether or not you're going to successfully do a wall kick. And the only way that I could really overcome that was just by jumping, and then as soon as I got close enough to the wall, just mashing the jump button and hoping that I would trigger the wall kick before Mario rammed his forehead into the bricks. That's super infuriating, and I don't know why that decision was made. I think it was pointless. That's one thing that kind of bothers me about it. I will say that there's also some things about how Mario just moves in general that sometimes feels a little floaty, or like you don't have as great a control over him as you'd like. You were talking about how the fighting mechanics, as punching and kicking, isn't a major part of the game, and it's not really. But the few stars that basically require you to do that feel like the weaker parts of the game, and for good reason, because, as you said,
it's not the primary focus. Yeah.
Right. It's not the purpose of the game. The whole focus of it was platforming, running, jumping, that sort of thing. So I get that. These things, though, as I said, they feel super weak and they're also incredibly irritating. So in the first like lava level that you get to, I don't remember what it's called off the top of my head right now, but there's a star specifically where the intention is for you to go into the level and
lethal lava land, by the way.
Yes, there you go. Lethal lava land. To go in and basically bump these enemies off of the platforms they're on into the lava and kill them. I believe they're called bullies, and they're basically just like big black like cannonballs with horns and feet. And their whole shtick, right, is that as soon as they see you, they charge you and bump into you and knock you backwards.
Yeah, I didn't like them.
That is so infuriating, and here is why. Because every time they bump into you, Mario gets bounced backwards and he falls flat on his ass. And the animation of Mario getting bumped and then standing back up is slower than the recovery animation for the bullies. So even if you guys kind of like hit each other at the same time, Mario is still at a disadvantage because it takes longer for him to stand back up. And and this happened to me, where you will actually get stuck in a loop that you cannot get out of the bully just charging you and bumping you backwards repeatedly until you fall into the lava and eventually die. That to me, that's an oversight. Like, that's bad game design. And as I said, these are nitpicks. I'm nitpicking, but they are things that made me incredibly infuriated. And I was thinking about it and I'm like, how the fuck did I play this game so much when I was younger? And the only thing I could think of is just like, back in my day, I only had a handful of games to play. So if I wanted to play something, I just put a whole bunch of time into this game or something else. But I didn't have a Steam backlog of like 300 games like I do now.
Right.
So I was sort of, funneled into just banging my head against this game and getting good at it, essentially.
Well, that's a lot of games for that era, to be honest. I mean,
sure, yeah.
Yeah, pre-internet, pre-adulthood, pre like mass of video games being released. And no, I can completely understand where you're coming from, because like I said, the fighting itself isn't good, and I never liked the bullies in the lava land. But I will say it does have a pretty forgiving recovery mechanic in the fact that coins restore your health, and there are always a fair amount of coins everywhere you go. It's not that hard. Like you fall in the lava, I think it takes off 3 health points, and if you recover and you get out of the way and you go back to some coins, you can get back into the fight relatively easily. As long as you know what you're doing, right? And as long as you know that that's what you're supposed to do. Now, going back to some issues that I do have, and I think there are issues here, is I do think that the platforming in some areas, particularly with the camera, is a little too precise when it comes to how you're supposed to manage the platforming with the camera mechanic. Because there's some places, and I hate isometric views. I hate it when games get isometric. And you're expected to move your character in a diagonal while platforming and jumping. And it's not so much of the control itself, but as the visual aspect it provides. And sometimes you cannot avoid that aspect with the camera no matter what you do. And this is particularly a problem in Bowser castles. When it comes to precise manipulation of the controller. It's not this is a nitpick, obviously, like you said. But that is an issue. I also not a big fan of all the levels. I'm not a fan of the desert level, shifting sandland. Do not like that level, like at all.
Nope. I don't either. There are so many mechanics in that level that are just there to piss you off. And actually, that's one of the first levels that came to mind when you were talking about precise platforming, because one of the things that you need to do, right, in that level is get to the top of the pyramid. And as you are scaling that pyramid, the platform that you are walking on gets progressively thinner until it is literally just the width of Mario's character. And that in and of itself would be infuriating, but then also coupled with they throw enemies floating around there that throw fire at you that... By the way, if you didn't know, if Mario gets hit by fire in this game, he runs around like a crazy person with his ass on fire, and you basically fall off the pyramid. Like, there's no avoiding that.
Right.
And then, as if that wasn't enough, every angled surface in this game, if Mario cannot scale it, he will be forced into a backwards slide animation. So if you accidentally walk too far close to like the pyramid and the angled surface that it is, Mario will do a backwards slide and you'll fall right the fuck off. And oh, by the way, did we mention that this pyramid is also surrounded by a swirling pit of quicksand that you immediately die in?
By the way, I never
Also
had that
that.
issue because I always made sure I had the red cap before going into that level, which is allows you to fly.
Yeah.
However, flying sucks. Let's just say that the flying mechanic, the wing cap, is garbage. Flying in this game is not fun. It is not enjoyable. It is hard to control. And if you say you love
hard to control.
If you say you love flying in this game, either you're crazy or you're lying.
Oh, you mean you don't like having to do like a nosedive and pull up in order to gain altitude? Like that's not a fun thing for you to try to do?
No, I didn't like it in
crazy.
Super Mario World. Why would I like it in a 3D environment? If I don't like it with the cape, why would I like it with your shitty ass wings on your cap? I mean, holy shit, dude. It's not fun.
And also, unlike Super Mario World, your flight is timed because the cap times out. So if you didn't use the imprecise flying mechanic to get what you needed to get, like flying through tiny little red coins or some shit, you will just plummet from the sky. So there's also that.
However, again, they didn't overuse the flight cap mechanic. So
thank God for that.
Yeah, it was trash. Metal Mario, on the other hand, I did like. I did like Metal Mario.
Yeah, no, Metal Mario is pretty good.
Yeah, no complaints with Metal Mario. It worked great in the water levels. They're better than Zelda's.
Actually, that is true. Yeah, it's better than the Iron Boots or whatever.
I'm just gonna hit on Zelda as much as I can whenever the opportunity presents itself.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I'm not offended at all. Mm-hmm.
That's the goal.
It's fine.
I don't want to offend you whatsoever. That'd be very inappropriate.
But yeah, so I guess that's the majority of I think the nitpicky stuff that I have with it. And don't let this make you think that we dislike the game. I think it's pretty clear that we still love this friggin' thing. It's just that it is not, it's not escaping from criticism even for being what it is, because there are some things that definitely could have been improved upon, which I think were improved in later iterations. But
briefly,
yeah,
let's talk about what do you think of the DS remaster?
It's garbage.
It is.
It's straight garbage. Like
it's so bad.
I didn't have anything else to say about it. It's bad, which sucks because like the DS remake for Ocarina of Time is amazing. Actually, that's really the definitive way to play that game right now. Right?
Okay. Key difference.
Yeah.
3DS remake.
Yeah. Well,
DS remake.
Yes, that actually is a good point. Yes. The Ocarina of Time one was 3DS, where this was a DS remake. So that is a solid point. But I mean, outside of that, like some of the things, it's a little harder to define why it sucks. Like it just feels wrong. Like the gameplay feels wrong. Like they didn't translate it well. Like to the point where some of the issues that we've been talking about as far as some imprecisions in how Mario controls or things like that seem to have been amplified in some way in this version. And then not only that, but they made some very weird design decisions as far as what they changed. Like, why the fuck do you start the game as Yoshi? Can anybody explain that to me?
I was about to go that when you said the way Mario controls, and I was about to go, Mario controls?
Yeah, I mean, eventually...
Unfortunately, it was just very strange. If you ever want an argument for why Mario 64 should never be played with a D-pad, that is your reason. I mean, it's playable. I will say that. It's playable with the D-pad. However, the game highly encourages you to play it with the stylus or the silly-ass thumb cover that the original lanyard came with. Does anyone remember that? Am I the only one who remembers that?
I think you're the only one.
So the lanyard, I know we're kind of semi-tangent here. The original DS when it came out, because I got my DS in like 2000 when it first came out, and I actually got it in Maine, Shane, for your information.
Oh, all right.
It came with a lanyard.
Did it come with like complimentary maple syrup samples?
No, it wasn't that advanced. I wish it came with lobster, but in any case, It came with a hockey puck.
Yeah, the hockey puck was the fucking Mario DS cartridge.
Exactly. So
Sorry. Go on.
So the lanyard came with this like thumb cover that like you put the lanyard over your thumb, and there's like this hard plastic cover, and you're supposed to take that lanyard when you didn't want to use the stylus, and that is what you were supposed to use on the touchscreen to move Mario and friends around on Mario 64 DS. And it didn't work because they're trying.
Sucks.
Because first of all, you have to like the only comfortable way to use it is with your dominant hand. And if your dominant hand is your right hand, now you're having problems jumping.
Now you're playing with power.
It's supposed to like simulate the analog stick, but it doesn't, and it's so bad.
Hey, you guys want to put like a plastic nipple on your thumb and try to play the game that way? All right. What, you don't want to do that? Okay. Stop for a moment and try to imagine playing Mario 64 with a goddamn stylus. Just think about that one for a moment. Like, it's so bad.
Good.
No, it's really not. And yes, to your point, it illustrates why the control scheme for the N64 worked so well for this game. Because if it doesn't have that analog control stick for movement, you might as well not even try to play it.
And they didn't even improve the camera.
No, they didn't at all. So it basically took all of the things that were mildly problematic about the original and just cranked them up to 11 on the DS, and was just like, well, here you go. I mean, for what it's worth, they updated the textures. Like, it looks nicer, not by a whole lot, but it does.
It's like they saw The Legend of Gabos and was like, you know what? We shouldn't have passed that up. Let's make it our DS game.
I also made the mistake of giving that to my fiance as her first like experience for Mario 64 ever. Because I had been talking the game up, of course, right? Because I was like, oh, well, if you want to play some of these games that, historically have been, good or whatever, like, here, play this one. And I gave her that. It was a bad idea in retrospect, because I think it kind of turned her off from the game in general now. But
okay. Like, I wouldn't have. Okay, I'm surprised that she agreed to marry you, because if I was given Mario 64 DS as a present for video games, and I was like, this guy's hobby is video games, there's not much hope for you at that point.
Okay, listen, first of all, it was not a gift because I owned the copy of Mario 64 DS, and so I let her borrow it because she has her own 3DS. I mean, I suppose you could make some sort of commentary on why I even own that cartridge in the first place, but is what it is.
I mean, I do too.
But yeah, overall, maybe not the greatest decision. And then, of course, she's also been watching me replay the original and me like screaming at the TV when Mario doesn't jump or kick the way that I want him to. So I kind of get the feeling that maybe she may not jump into Mario 64 on her own accord. So
probably not.
We'll see how that goes.
I did try playing it on the 2DS. She said, did she play it on her 3DS?
Yeah, she did. And she was like, this is awful. And she stopped after like the first level.
So the biggest problem too with that is I played it on the 2DS. And of course the 3DS has the analog nub.
Right.
But that game wasn't designed to still work with it. So it's like doubly terrible because it's still reading the analog nub as some sort of digital D-pad input. So it doesn't make it any better. It makes control like much worse. It doesn't make it better.
No. But at any rate, so as I said, we were going to try to close this out on a more positive note because we've got most of our nitpicks out of the way. So there were a couple of things that we had pointed out that we wanted to just cover as kind of some interesting little like factoids or whatnot about 64 and sort of its development and things like that. So one of the first notable things that we probably ought to just touch on real quick is the fact that if you're unfamiliar, the voice actor for Mario is Charles Martinet, and he has been technically since a little bit before this game, but this was the first mainline Mario title where Martinet kind of debuted as the quote unquote real voice of Mario. So the voice that everybody kind of associates with Mario, this is kind of where it really began. And a fun fact about that, you can actually look this up on YouTube if you want, or maybe I'll just be an asshole and clip it into this episode. But there is actually a promotional footage piece out there floating around of the voice that they had sort of as a placeholder prior to Martinet doing his lines. And it is like the voice of Toad, but cranked up a few extra octaves and like 10 times more annoying. It is insane. And I'm so glad they didn't go with it.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's a fun one. Let's see.
I do think they picked the right voice for Mario.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, and even Martinet didn't really know exactly what he wanted to do with it in the beginning. I mean, because up until this point, the assumption was that, you know, Mario was just going to sound like a gruff, like, you know, Brooklyn plumber or something. And, you know, for what it's worth, the Super Mario Brothers Super Show may or may not have had something to do with that influence.
Well, it's not like he was really expected to deliver major narratives and monologues or anything like that. And, you know, it's just basic sounds. But even that, it's just really carried over and really has identified with Mario.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Let's go.
It's a me.
It's a me, a Mario.
But yeah, so there's that. Yeah. There's a couple other things, I suppose. So you want to talk a little bit about the Luigi rumor?
Oh, yeah. It's not really a fact, but like there's just all sorts of rumors around this game. And I always thought it was crazy because this wasn't a rumor I heard as a kid. I don't know about you. I'd never heard this rumor. I did hear that it, like, for the longest time before it was official, that when you got all 120 stars, that you could get Luigi. Or you got 120 stars, you saw Yoshi, and you did something else, you could get Yoshi. But it was, you know, all those are, of course, false. But I didn't care about what was on the damn fountain in that one area where you can go into, you know, the Boo's mansion, right?
Right.
And apparently this has started all sorts of weird rumors, whether Luigi is, you know, like supposedly people read it as L is real 2401, which a lot of people have like inferred as development for Paper Mario, or Luigi is a playable character, or everything like that. I have no idea what it says. I don't think anyone really has any real idea what it says or if it means anything. It probably doesn't mean anything. It's just,
I think one of the other interpretations of it is that it may have been, it was supposed to say Eternal Star or something like that. Seems like that's mostly still up in the air. I mean, so I never heard of this either as a kid. I think one of the other weird rumors floating around, because of course we need to have creepypasta bullshit everywhere, is that like there's some sort of
creepypasta
that like Luigi was dead or something.
The only good creepypasta is the Majora's Mask one. I think that's the best one. Everything else is just kind of garbage.
That is,
but yeah, this is
so. No, you can't play as Luigi. Although, as we mentioned in the brief history, at the beginning of development of this game, they actually wanted it to be a split screen co-op where Mario and Luigi would actually start in different places in the castle, and you would kind of work together to, you know, conquer the thing and whatnot. But it never panned out that way.
And I'm thankful it didn't. I don't think that would have been nearly as good as a game.
Nah, I don't think so either. And I think they realized that.
I'm thankful. And like, to be honest, like I can't think of any Mario game, 3D Mario game where you can play it co-op and it being a better experience. Like, I guess Super Mario 3D World technically, but I can't think of like that. That's a different experience altogether.
Speaking of things that were kind of cut from the game, of which there were many, by the way, we won't go through all of it here. You can certainly find this stuff out on the internet or YouTube. There are plenty of gaming YouTubers out there that have covered this stuff pretty exhaustively, because there is actually quite a bit of unused content in the files of this game. But just one interesting thing, just to sort of illustrate how ambitious Miyamoto was with this. Initially, he had planned to have almost somewhere upwards of 72 stages in this game, which is insane, because what we ended up with was basically 15, and then you've got like the Bowser levels. And even then, just with the 15 levels, this game feels fairly significant. It's pretty meaty, particularly for, you know, a cartridge game. I can't even imagine what they would have done with 72 stages, but they kind of took a different approach with it and saying like, okay, listen, we're limited by, you know, hardware and storage space and whatnot. So rather than going with quantity, let's do quality. And that's kind of where they decided to go the route that they took, which was having the player explore the same level multiple times, but having a different goal each time, and having the level itself actually change slightly, given, whichever star you were trying to acquire, which, I think was a smart choice. And it also did sort of line up with their whole notion that this game was supposed to be about exploration. So rather than going from start to finish on a whole shitload of stages, you've really thoroughly explored, the sort of handful that you had.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But one of the things the DS I think did right, and if I'm wrong, just tell me I'm wrong.
Sure.
Is that it lets you select or at least see all the available stars in the stages when first entering the stage. Whereas the original Mario 64, you did have to get them in progression unless you just happened to get them by happenstance.
I believe that is correct. Yes. I mean, I know for a fact that the original did not show you all 6 stars right off the bat. Unless you like skipped ahead. Like I've done that on a few of them where like I'll get all the red coins first or something, and that's technically the 3rd star in the level. And so if that's the case, then suddenly the first 2 will show up as being sort of grayed out. But even then, they won't let you select those stars to see what like the name of it is to give you a hint of what you're supposed to do until you finish the one prior.
Yeah, and they're rather cryptic. I do think that's another. You can nitpick on that as well.
Some of them are.
Yeah, because selecting certain stars will open up different areas of the level depending on the level.
Right. And as much as as much as we've been kind of shitting on the DS version, and with good reason because it's kind of bad, they at least did make a couple of changes that I think were for the better. One thing that I ran into specifically recently was playing through one of the water levels where you have to get the sunken pirate ship to raise up. And to get the star in that sunken ship, you get inside the ship by first you have to bait this giant eel to get out of the hole that allows you to get inside the ship. And once you do that,
it was terrifying.
Yeah, super, super terrifying. Which, by the way, is totally counter to the soundtrack for that level because it's super chill and like zen, and then you have this like nightmare fuel eel just flying around. But anyway, so you get in there and you figure, okay, I've done the thing. I can get inside the ship. I get my star. No, that's not what happens. What happens is you get inside there and there are 4 chests. With no hint whatsoever, you have to figure out what order you open the chests in, and if you get it wrong, you get zapped and you lose life. Which, by the way, your life meter also doubles as your breath meter while you're underwater. So if you take damage, you are that closer to drowning to death.
Hold on. Yeah. But you can go underwater and come back up and it refills your entire health. It's a cheap way to do it.
Yes, you know what, Chris? That's right. You can. And you want to know how they laid out that part of that level? They put the only place where you could come up for air at the polar opposite end of the ship. So every time you got the order of opening the chests wrong, because you had to do it randomly, you get to swim to the other side of the ship to get air. So that's fun. But anyway, so you have to do that.
Get good.
And then once you do that and you get the sequence right, the ship starts to raise up. And so the water level goes down. And then to get your star, because you're not done yet, you now have to jump up a series of barnacles to get to the top where there is a box where your star is located for you to actually get. And if you happen to mismanage one of those jumps, we go back to what I said earlier about angled surfaces. Mario will then go into a backslide and fall all the way back down. That is infuriating as shit.
By the way, since we've gone back to nitpicking, I just want everyone to remember. I want everyone to remember this is coming from a self-proclaimed fan of Dark Souls.
Okay, unless you want to make this episode like 3 hours, we can talk about why the difficulty in Dark Souls actually makes sense and is fair. But anyway, I digress.
Look, scrub, get good.
But no, so one of the changes, they actually made it
Mario
very
64,
straightforward.
get good.
Yeah, they made it much more straightforward, where in the DS version, you basically just go inside the ship. There's just one chest. You pop it open. There's your star. Done. It's a minor example of some of the tweaks that they made to the gameplay that I actually think were an improvement, because I swear some of the design decisions that went into the original Mario 64, it's almost as if the team had like some sort of spite for like the players, because there's just some unnecessary hoops you have to jump through in order to accomplish certain things. and that being one example. But anyway, yeah, we circled back to nitpicking. So, okay, I'm done
Yes.
bitching about that again. I think.
Oh, by the way,
Yeah.
As we're getting closer to the end of the episode, I
Yes.
just want to say the soundtrack is fantastic. I did love the soundtrack to this game.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, like all the
It's
music
very
in this is
memorable
great.
and catchy,
Yeah.
and it's better than Zelda's, except for Gerudo Valley.
I mean, yeah, Gerudo Valley's pretty good. I think what was the windmill song? That one's pretty good too.
Dire Dire Docks is, like you said, the chill music is just, it's perfect, serene, zen, aquatic music. It's perfect.
Until you get murdered by a giant eel.
Which is terrifying, gives you nightmares, especially if you're 11.
Yes. All right. So yeah, we are running a little long. So I think one last thing, just as a little interesting side note in the history of this game, is there actually was going to be a sequel. The 64 disk drive. Anybody remember that? No. Okay.
Never heard of her.
So the 64 disk drive was something that they were going to add on to the Nintendo 64. And I think when I was looking this up, I think the number was like they end up selling like 15,000 units of it or some abysmal number like that. So it never really got much life. And so therefore not a lot of games took advantage of it or were developed for it at all. But there was going to be a Super Mario 64 2 that was going to leverage the 64 DD, but that got canceled when Nintendo realized that the disk drive was basically a giant commercial failure.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
Because the 32X did so well.
So at any rate, I know that we could probably continue talking about this game for quite a bit longer because there's a lot to say about it. But suffice to say, I'll just go ahead and put it out there that I obviously would recommend playing this game to anybody, especially if you had never played it before, just because it for all of the nitpicks that we have, it actually holds up extremely well. And if you ever wanted to see sort of no weird pun intended, but the genesis of three-dimensional gaming, then you really couldn't do any better than playing Mario 64.
Bubsy 3D.
Yes. Yeah. Just kidding. Actually, this whole episode is just what we're trying to get at is that it's a better game. You should go play that.
Yeah. If you want to see the genesis of 3D gaming, play Bubsy 3D. If you want to see the genesis of 3D gaming done well, play Mario 64.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah. Also, and for the love of God, don't play the DS version, please.
I mean, you could. It's not unplayable. It's just not good. It's not a very good representation. So, as Shane said, does it hold up today? Yes. I would say it does. But you need to play it on the N64. You need to play it with that controller. That controller was designed for that game, not the other way around.
Yes.
So play it with the N64 controller. I know original hardware, everything, cost is very limited. If you can't afford it, I completely understand. There are ways to play it on Virtual Console and any other way you may need to by sailing the friendly seas. But do play this game. It is a staple in any game historian's experiences. And if you're listening to this podcast, you probably already have played this game, but by some stretch of imagination you haven't, or happenstance that you have not played this game, do yourself a favor, go through it. It is a masterclass on the basic fundamentals and how to do a 3D platformer correctly.
So, with all that said, I think we'll wrap things up here. We'll touch on all of the ways that you can get a hold of us. I think if you've been listening to the show for any amount of time, you know. But for those of you that may be just joining us for the first time because you saw Mario 64, hi, how are you? And
Mario!
If you'd like to listen in and know more, then you can hop on over to our Patreon, where we produce extra bonus audio content for our 16-bit tier subscribers. So if you like us enough to want to hear more of that stuff and hear us talk about some of the other games that we're playing outside of our mainline episodes, you can do that. You can go over to bit.ly/rhpatron. We do have the merch store open. That is bit.ly/rhpmerch. And if you just want to reach out and say, hey, you can do that on pretty much anywhere, but Instagram and Facebook are probably the best venues for that, or Twitter. Any of the three, really. And we're pretty good about responding, so we'll probably say hi back. But at any rate, is there anything else that you want to add, Chris?
Oh, yeah. Sunday streams. Tentatively, 2100 Eastern Time. Be there on Twitch, twitch.tv/Retro Hangover.
That's right.
And we will see you there. We're also on YouTube. Are we YouTube/Retro Hangover? But if we're not, just type in Retro Hangover in YouTube. I think all the kids know how to do that if you don't know. So just ask a 10-year-old and he'll direct you to your local YouTube station.
All right. Well, with all that said, until next time.
Play with your double big bob-omb joysticks.